first home site of Peter and Ann was up on a hill above the Yakanukuni River. Since it would flood during the year, they would have come up with this high land that would be safe for them.
My husband told me that that's where Daddy said that it was, and if Daddy said it was, then it had to be. But then I went back to the courthouse, and I had the lady to look it up, and she told me exactly where it was, and we figured out what date it was, and the date had found that. But I was tickled to find that part, and then the pile of rocks. And I can remember lots of stories that my grandfather told me, and he would take me on trips down the St. Anne's Road and point out who lived where and what happened and where they went to school and how long it took them to walk there. It was, it was really interesting and kept the memories going. But Grandpa taught me how to drive in that car, and we'd go down the St. Anne's Road, and that's true. And I wished I'd listened a little bit more. And they'd come up here and they'd sit right there with a card table and play cards. And I got pictures of Uncle Mike and Dad, Grandpa, and Monsignor, and Joe Harkins, I think. And Monsignor done gone to sleep playing cards. And he's the one that taught me how to eat cornflakes and ice cream for supper.
What?
Ooh, have you ever not tried it? You need to try it. Mix you a bowl of cornflakes and throw you a scoop of ice cream in there and have at it, because it's the best. Grandpa never did want a big supper. He'd go home and eat his cornflakes and ice cream. I can remember Aunt Liza would come and visit, and she would stay in her room. There was a room called Aunt Liza's room, and that's where she would stay. And I'd go stay with her in the summertime, and me and Agnes and the Quads, we'd hang out for a couple of weeks. But I can remember her living there in Jackson in a two-door apartment, and we'd play jacks on the front porch. But that was when kids could play games and have fun. It wasn't a computer game, but we had fun. And Aunt Liza would bake for us, and we'd go walking down the street, and we had a good time. She made her apricot nectar cake. Daddy always told us about a lady being bit by a rabid dog, and it's on Smith Creek, which is down the St. Anne's Road. He told us that this lady was bit by a rabid dog and was buried out there, and when it got dark, she would come out and she would have the head of a dog and the body of a lady. And every year we have a hayride at Halloween, and we go that way and we tell this story to the kids on the hayride. And this is some of the graves that are covered with rocks over on Smith Creek, just past the old D. Pat Harkins house. This is the ones we looked at that day. Those are some amazing things. I'm just amazed that I'm stacked up there, how they're stacked up and squared off, and the trees didn't even grow up in the middle of them, most of them. They're just around those trees.
I was there just about every summer because there were three of us boys, and my parents just wouldn't leave us together because we were really almost terrorists. They would send my brother Richard over to stay with the Lucketts. I would go to St. Anne's, and then Robert would stay at home. That would keep us all three apart. Yeah, I would be there every summer, and I had to take on some real heavy duties there as a youngster. I really did. It was fun. In retrospect, I really wouldn't take anything for the experience of learning how to make a living and eke it out of the ground. They were dirt farmers, and they did everything right there at home. Made their own food. They even sawed their own lumber for their smokehouses and chicken houses and things that they had there as attendant to their house, and the first few years I spent there in the summer, I was very lonesome. Your brother Nick was there occasionally. I would see him at church. Ken Drake would come to the Peter and Sudi's, and I would see them. I remember going to Sudi and Peter's to play with Ken Drake, and I don't know why it stands out in my mind so vividly, but they had a large front porch and a large back porch, which was typical of the houses, the farmhouse houses during those times. They didn't do much in the way of spraying for mosquitoes and flies and stuff like that. And Uncle Peter would sit on that back porch with fly swatter while the visit was going on, and he would swat those flies, and I mean, every time you look up, he was hitting one even from your leg. The Leo Craft House on St. Ann Road, and Paul and Catherine were there, and I would eat with them occasionally, and just loved to be there because it was somebody to play with in the summer when I called myself being lonesome. But they were really a good, upstanding community family there. She nursed her father through his last years, and I always had such tremendous and deep respect for her for doing that. And Catherine Kraft Fletcher and Paul Kraft were my biggest playmates. Buddy, I mean, when I got to see them, it was happy times for me because I didn't get to see very many children. That was part of it I didn't like. Being there in the summers was working quite a bit and then not having much time to play. And I remember Little Pat. I would go there with my grandfather and my grandmother and visit occasionally. And I went to Big Pat's house several times. And they used to visit with Mike and Mary, and I used to love to see them come in. I don't know, they seem to always bring somebody with them, youthful. And I know Nick came with them several times, and I loved that, having just someone to throw rocks with, you know. Well, Big Pat was really the kind of kingpin around there. He carried a big stick, I call it, and he was very, very much into the business of that community, and everybody looked up to him. They really did. They really did. Now, another family that they had the one child, Mildred, who's married to Roy Wilkinson. They were frequent visitors in Mike and Mary's house, and I used to travel with my grandfather when he'd go into Thomastown on Saturdays to have the corn milled and go into the locker and get some meat, frozen meats for that week or whatever. And we would stop by Joe Harkins on the way. That was Red Joe. And Joe and my grandfather always shared that drink together. If Joe came by Mary and Mike's, they didn't do it in the house in front of anybody. But I have followed them to the car so many times, or truck or whatever, wagon, I don't remember how they were traveling. And they would pull that bottle out and they would drink it from the bottle. There would be no glass. They would just pass that bottle around back and forth between them. And I very distinctly remember that. But Joe was a very respected person in that community also. And I don't remember Mildred that much, but that was their only child. And Joe had a lot of land up there that I think they still have in that family. The other thing that happened up there that I've told many times is I was on the way out to the fields to meet up with Ansley and Buddy to give them water. And I was probably 8 or 9, but when you're walking through cotton fields and you run upon a big old snake traversing the path you're in, you throw that water out wherever you can get rid of it and you start hauling fast. Well, I went hauling towards Ansley with my mouth wide open, my hands out like this, hollering snake. And when he got up to me, he got me, he was looking at my hands and he was looking at my legs. He says, "Where did he bite you?" I said, He didn't bite me, I just saw him. He started picking up dirt clods and he threw them at me as far as he could throw so I got out of sight.
Probably scared him half to death.
It did.
The doctors were probably
As
an
I
hour
grew-
away.
As I grew older in life, I realized he was as afraid as I was that I had been bitten.
Well, I married in 1987, and moved to Good Hope. Well, in 1997, we moved back up here, built 2 chicken houses, breeder houses, which is egg houses. And from then on, we have farmed cattle, which Daddy had cattle, Grandpa had cattle. As far as I know, Big Daddy had cattle.
Yeah.
And the cattle just kept on, and we still have cattle here today. We have row crops, corn, tomatoes, peas, squash, you name it. I stay really, really busy during the summertime. But we had over 400 tomato plants this year. We had a pretty good sized cornfield this year, but the wild hogs got in that and cleaned it out for us. But now on the hill in the pasture where they used to grow corn is what they called the Indian mounds.
Mm-hmm.
And when they plow it up in the winter, in the spring, you could go out there and you could find arrowheads.
A big part of the St. Anne's Harkins story has to do with the Order of the Mercy Nuns. Those of you who've been around them in central Mississippi know what a strong force they were for a long time. It amazes me the trajectory of their history. They were founded in Ireland by Catherine Macaulay back in the 1830s, but already by 1860 they had sent nuns out across the world, and had gotten as far as Vicksburg, Mississippi within 30 years of the order being founded. So many of the orders of nuns go back for centuries or for over 1,000 years. But the Mercies are a relatively new group. They just spread like wildfire around the world. And then within the first 150 years, the trajectory completely changed, and now they are almost all gone. There are very, very few left. But they played a big part in the religious development of St. Anne's Church. The connection that our family had with the Mercy Nuns began with the fact that there really were no schools in that area, especially for women, that would go beyond 8th grade. So wanting their daughters to be educated as well as their sons, the different Harkins girls were sent off to the different Mercy facilities in the state and spread all around. One of my aunts, Grace, was in Meridian, Beulah was in Macomb, Teresa was in Jackson, Serena and Lalonde at St. Francis the Mother House over in Vicksburg. So we've actually had a total of 7 women enter the Mercy Order, 2 of whom go back so far that next to nothing is known. I included what I did know about them in the book, but for the most part it's the 5 later ones that we knew who were so dedicated to the church that they spent their lives raising the Catholic children of Mississippi. I'll always have a real admiration for the Mercy Nuns.
In fact, all of the Mercy nuns were highly educated. I mean, they spent a lot on their education.
Well, we started at St. Peter's first in 3rd grade, Sister Ancilla. If it hadn't been Sister Ancilla, I'd have been a complete dummy. Because she gave me a little book, started out a little thin book, to take home to read every day. And the first name of the first book was I Can Sleep When It Rains. But Sister Ancilla was, well, she was a cousin. She was Harkins. And Sister Mary Matthew,
Sister Mary Matthew, top flight.
top flight, cute as a bug's ear.
Cute as a bug's ear.
Sister Serena was a principal at St. Richard's.
Principal was a relative.
Yeah, I wouldn't have made it through school without all my kinfolks that were teachers and principals.
I really think the debt is owed to the Mercy nuns. They were the ones who really raised us, brought us up through grade school, high school, and I think that's their great legacy. They may not be around in the future, but they had a tremendous impact on our family directly and the Catholic Church in Mississippi in general. It's really fascinating to see how it began, how it reached its height, and then the equal falling off after World War II as most of the family left the land. And now, 100 years later, it's come full circle, and there are very few people left in the community. Almost all the houses have collapsed and gone back into the wooded land that it was 200 years ago. And it's become something totally new. That is, it's now tree farms, and it's turning out to be probably the most valuable crop that could be grown on the land. The land is not that fertile like it is over in the Mississippi Delta, but it's great for growing pine trees.